A ruthless cop forces a young black girl to cut off her cherished braids, convinced she's just another troublemaker. But when he learns who her father really is, it's already too late. Her dad's powerful connections will turn the tables on the officer in ways he never imagined. What will happen when a moment of cruelty threatens to destroy a mission that could save countless lives? And can the girl reclaim her dignity in the face of humiliation? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The streetlights cast long shadows across the wet pavement as Kiana walked home, her white recital dress catching the gentle glow. Her fingers still tingled from playing Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major, and a small smile played on her lips as she hummed the melody. The program she held close was a reminder of her achievement tonight, her first solo performance at the prestigious Madison Concert Hall. The rain picked up slightly, and Kiana quickened her pace. Her braids, intricately done by her father that morning, were starting to dampen. Despite her best efforts to stay dry, she could see her breath in the cool evening air. As she turned onto Maple Street, just 3 blocks from home, Officer Damon Price slouched in his patrol car, fighting exhaustion after a 12-hour shift. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Kiana walking alone. What's someone like her doing in this neighborhood? He muttered, straightening in his seat. The sight of her pristine white dress and neat braid trades only heightened his suspicion. It didn't fit his idea of who belonged here. The patrol car's engine hummed as Price slowly pulled alongside Kiana. She noticed the vehicle that kept walking, clutching her program a little tighter. Hey, stop right there, Price called out sharply through his opened window. The sudden command made Kiana pause mid-step. What are you doing out here this late? I'm walking home from my piano recital, sir, Kiana replied evenly, though her heart began to R. I live on Cedar Avenue, just a few blocks away. Let me see some ID, Price demanded, his tone harsh and accusatory. He stepped out of his car, the door slamming behind him. Kiana hesitated, her hand instinctively moving to protect her bag. May I ask why I'm being stopped? Price's face hardened. Empty your bag now. On the ground, sir. My recital program and sheet music will be ruined in the rain, Kiana protested quietly, her voice steady despite her growing fear. You're not cooperating, Price snapped. Are you part of a gang? Those braids are gang-related, aren't they? Kiana reached for her phone. I'd like to call my father. In one swift motion, Price grabbed her phone. That's it. You're obstructing an investigation. The handcuffs appeared in his hands, cold metal glinting in the streetlight. Kiana stood motionless as the rain fell harder, watching her cherished recital program slip from her bag and float into a puddle, the evening's accomplishments dissolving in the rain. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the holding area as Kiana sat on the cold metal bench. Her white recital dress, now damp and wrinkled, water dripped steadily from her clothes onto the concrete floor, creating a small puddle at her feet. Despite her shivering, she kept her posture straight and her gaze steady. Officer Price watched her from his desk, tapping his pen irritably against the booking forms. Her silence grid him. Most teenagers he arrested would be crying or pleading by now, but Kiana's quiet dignity felt like a challenge. Standard procedure for gang-affiliated detainees, Price announced loudly as a middle-aged barber reluctantly entered the holding area with his kit. The barber's eyes widened when he saw Kiana taking in her formal attire and elegant braids. Officer, I don't think the barber started, but Price cut him off. Just do it, Price snapped, unlocking the cell. It's protocol. Kiana didn't resist as they sat her in a chair. Her eyes met Price's in the reflection of a small wall mirror, and he found himself unable to hold her gaze. The barber's hands trembled as he began cutting through the intricate braids, each snip echoing in the silent room. Tears welled in Kiana's eyes, but didn't fall. She maintained her composure, even as her carefully styled braid fell one by one into her lap. The uneven chunks of hair left behind stood in stark contrast to her previous elegant appearance, but still she didn't break. Price shifted uncomfortably under her unwavering stare, muttering about department regulations that everyone present knew were fabricated. The barber's movements grew increasingly hesitant, his face etched with shame. When the last braid fell, Kiana carefully gathered them all, cradling them in her lap like precious things. The silence in the room felt heavier than ever just as Price turned to leave. Captain Monroe burst through the door, his face darkened as he took in the scene. Kiana's butchered hair, the braids in her lap, and Price's defensive stance. "What the hell is going on here?" Monroe's voice cut through the silence like thunder. Captain Monroe's footsteps echoed through the hallway as he marched Price into his office. The door slammed behind them, making the blinds rattle. "Sit down," Monroe ordered, his voice tight with anger. Price opened his mouth to speak, but Monroe cut him off. "Not a word." The captain grabbed a folder from his desk and threw it down with such force that papers scattered across the surface. Among them was a photo of Marcus Bennett in full federal attire. "Do you know who that is?" Monroe demanded. Price squinted at the photo. "No, sir, that's federal investigator Marcus Bennett, the girl you just arrested and humiliated. That's his daughter, Kiana." Monroe's words landed like punches. "He's been working undercover for 3 years to take down Grayson's network. 3 years of careful work that you might have just compromised." Price shifted in his chair. "Sir, I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Monroe's laugh was harsh. "Show me where. In the protocol it says to cut a minor's hair without cause or consent. Show me where it says to arrest someone for walking home from a piano recital." Through the office window, Price watched as another officer gently led Kiana toward the exit. Her head was held high, but her eyes blazed with quiet intensity. "This operation goes deeper than you can imagine," Monroe continued, spreading out surveillance photos and case files. "Bennett has infiltrated one of the largest criminal enterprises in the city. One wrong move, one whisper of his daughter being harassed by police, and it all falls apart." Price's throat felt dry. "I didn't know." "That's right, you didn't know. You didn't think." Monroe leaned forward. "And now we have to deal with the fallout. Bennett is on his way here. You're not leaving this station until he arrives." Price stared at the photo of Marcus Bennett, again, his stomach churning. In the break room later, he sat alone with a cold cup of coffee, his earlier certainty crumbling while fear of consequences dominated his thoughts. A small voice in his head whispered that maybe, just maybe, he had been terribly wrong. The steady click of expensive shoes echoed through the precinct hallway. Marcus Bennett strode purposefully toward Monroe's office, his tailored suit and composed demeanor a stark contrast to the usual late-night station atmosphere. Price watched through the office window, his stomach churning with a mixture of fear and stubborn pride. Captain Monroe met Marcus at the door, speaking in hushed tones while gesturing at a manila folder. Marcus simply raised his hand, cutting off Monroe's explanation. "I'd like to speak with Officer Price alone," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made Monroe step back without argument. In the confines of Monroe's office, Marcus settled into a chair across from Price. His calm demeanor only heightened the tension in the room. "Officer Price," Marcus began, his voice measured and controlled, "do you understand what your actions tonight have truly cost?" Price shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I was following 3 years," Marcus cut in smoothly. 3 years of careful work, countless lives at risk, and a network we've been trying to dismantle, all potentially compromised because you couldn't see past your own prejudices." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locked on Price. "So here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. Option 1, I make this incident public. Every detail, every moment of what you did to my daughter becomes headline news. Your career ends not with dignity, but with disgrace." Price's face paled as Marcus continued. "Option 2, you help me salvage this operation. You work under my direction to fix what you've broken." Marcus's expression hardened. "This isn't about saving you, Officer Price. This is about protecting innocent lives and completing a mission that's bigger than both of us." When Price tried to argue, Marcus silenced him with a look. "You have until morning to decide. Choose wisely. Your future depends on it." Price's jaw clenched as he nodded stiffly. He rose from his chair, feeling trapped and powerless. As he walked back to the break room, his mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. The weight of dread settled heavy in his stomach as he realized just how thoroughly his world had shifted. In a sing-blood evening, the morning sun barely pierced through the thick fog as Marcus and Price sat at a corner table in Joey's Cafe, a worn-down establishment 30 minutes outside the city limits. Steam rose from Marcus' coffee cup, while Price's remained untouched, his fingers Drumming nervously on the scratched Formica tabletop, Nathaniel Grayson Marcus said, quietly sliding a photo across the table. He runs one of the largest criminal enterprises on the East Coast, but you'd never know it. Looking at him, Price studied the image of the well-dressed man in his 50s, noting his friendly smile. And expensive suit looks more like a CEO than a crime boss. That's exactly how he wants to. Person now gone were the intricate braids that had taken hours to perfect, replaced by choppy short patches that felt foreign under her touch. Kiana swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears fall. She wouldn't give Officer Price that satisfaction even in private. Baby girl, Marcus's gentle voice came from the doorway. He stepped into the room, his normally confident stride hesitant. Sitting beside her on the cushioned bench, he placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm so sorry, I wasn't there to stop this. Kiana shook her head, forcing a small smile. It's okay, Dad, I'm fine. Her voice was steady, but her hands remained clasped tightly in her lap. About Officer Price, Marcus began, explaining how the man who humiliated her would now be part of their lives due to the operation. But Kiana had already risen, moving toward her beloved piano in the corner. Her fingers found the keys naturally, and she began to play. The melody started soft, uncertain, like morning rain. Then it grew, building into something raw and powerful. Her own composition, born from the night's pain, filled the room. Marcus moved to the doorway, watching his daughter transform her hurt into something beautiful. Her back was straight, her chin held high as her fingers danced across the keys. The music spoke what her words couldn't: anger, resilience, and an unwavering strength that made his heart swell with pride. The sunlight caught the tears she finally allowed to fall, but they didn't stop her playing. Each note was precise, deliberate, telling her story without a single word. Marcus stood silently, bearing witness to his daughter's quiet courage, reminded once again of how much of her mother lived on in her spirit. Price's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he pulled up to the warehouse. The building loomed before him, its weathered metal walls barely visible in the dim evening light. A row of expensive cars gleamed under the sparse security lights: a black Mercedes, a silver BMW, and a dark SUV. With tinted windows, he parked his police cruiser in a shadowy corner, his mouth dry as he rehearsed his story one last time. Underpaid cop, fed up with the system, he muttered to himself, trying to steady his nerves. Inside, the warehouse was surprisingly clean, with polished concrete floors and modern office spaces built along one wall. Victor Steele emerged from the shadows, his sharp features twisted in a permanent scowl, his eyes cold and calculating, locked on to Price like a predator sizing up its prey. So Victor said, his voice cutting through the silence, you're the cop who's looking to make some extra cash. His tone dripped with suspicion. Before Price could answer, the click of expensive shoes echoed through the space. Nathaniel Grayson appeared, dressed in an impeccable suit that probably cost more than Price's monthly salary. His smile was warm, but his eyes remained hard and evaluating Officer Price. Grayson said smoothly, I hear you're dissatisfied with your current situation. Price swallowed hard and dove into his prepared speech. The force doesn't pay enough to live on anymore. Too many rules, too much red tape. He tried to inject just the right amount of bitterness into his voice. I've got bills to pay, and I'm tired of watching criminals make more in a day than I make in a month. Victor circled him slowly. And we're supposed to believe you just decided to switch sides just like that? Everyone has their breaking point, Price responded, meeting Victor's gaze steadily. Despite his racing heart, Grayson watched the exchange with interest before speaking. Perhaps we can help each other, Officer Price, but trust must be earned. He nodded to Victor. My associate here will give you a small task. Consider it a trial run. Victor's expression remained skeptical as he handed Price a folded piece of paper. Don't disappoint us, he warned. Outside, Price's hands shook as he dialed Marcus's number. They bought it, he whispered into the phone. But Victor, he's watching me like a hawk. Be careful, Marcus replied quietly. Victor Steele didn't get where he is by being trusting. One wrong move, and he'll know. The streetlights cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Price trudged toward his car, his shoulders heavy from the day's events. His keys jingled in his hand, but a